All right, quite a simple adventure in Montreal today. So my Airbnb is, I guess Monk Station is where it's nearest, but between Monk and Agrenon. And I found out at the airport that my Metro card had expired. I looked it up. They last for 4 years. And I've been here a couple of days. I have not gone to get a new card yet. I was kind of thinking, do I necessarily need to? I'm going to talk this episode about the state of Airbnb and flights post-COVID. Airbnb prices are bad in Canada, so I'm not sure how often I'll be back to Montreal. Because pretty much I just kind of want to go to Mount Royal itself. And it's like a 2-hour walk from here, a little less than 2. But for now I'm still on foot, so I just hopped across the canal and I'm going toward, I think it's called Verdun station, but I'm just looking for a dollar store and possibly a Tim Hortons to get a coffee. Because one thing I did traveling this time, so I always have my one big book bag, and I used to just put all my stuff in it. And I had a slight amount of a system. But at the airport or whatever, if I had to take things out, it was kind of a pain. One thing I've done different this time that has been excellent, it's worked out really well, is bags within bags, the Russian nesting doll style, where all my clothes are in a slightly bigger bag that takes up about 3/4 of the interior of my main book bag, and then my other stuff, non-clothing stuff, in a smaller bag. That's this bag I bought at Oyama Road near Ikebukuro, and I still have it. And it's kind of neat too, because it's the gradations of importance, where the bag full of clothes, who cares what happens to that? I could toss the whole thing and I'd be fine. Where the other bag is much more important. I just passed some people talking French. And see, I'm not quite sure what exact brand of French I learned when I was a kid. Because there's obviously France French, and then there's Quebec French like we are here. I don't quite know what New Brunswick French is. Acadian French, I guess? It's definitely a bit different. Because, for example, the word yes is oui. And we learned it like that. Oui et non. But that person I just passed by said, wah. It is like they're like a duck, like quacking. Wah. Wah, bien sûr, wah. I mean, I guess it's like someone has a southern accent. But it's the French equivalent. Wah. I feel like since I went to French school growing up and half my family's French, I'm allowed to make fun of French accents. I give myself that right. But yeah, I was at the airport in Fredericton, and that's when I realized I need one more bag, because I still had just some miscellaneous charging cables and things like that I am using all the time that are not stashed away. They were just kind of loose. So if I just get one more little bag, I think my bag system will be pretty perfect. So I'm going to the dollar store to find a little bag. Actually, I'd rather go to a thrift store and buy a better, higher quality bag. But I don't know where one is, so the dollar store will do for now. And it could just be a fun thing to look for in Japan, because that's one of those things with having just one bag, just living out of a single book bag. The thing that's weird about it is you just literally can't buy stuff, because where's it going to go? What are you going to do with it? Buying that little bag on Oyama Road was like a treat. It's like, oh, I actually need a little bag. So maybe I'll keep my eyes peeled when I'm in Japan. Upgrade my bags to cool bags from Japan. Man, yeah, so it's been... Wait, when did I get in? Thursday? Yeah, today's Saturday, so I've been here 2 days. But yeah, I'm glad to report that 4-hour walk from the airport that would have been 3 if I didn't get lost. It's one of those things that is clearly stupid, just a dumb thing to do. I would never recommend to anyone else that they do that. But I'm glad to report that I don't know, as my body continues to deteriorate, it really is true that once you hit 40, things go to shit. Just out of nowhere, all of a sudden. Like I always had, I noticed in all my old photos, like I always had where my shoulders when I sit aren't even. And I found out later, specifically, I have an 8-degree tilt in my pelvis somehow that causes my spine to curve and then just leads to all kinds of problems. But I never noticed them before because I was young and spry. Now it's like my right shoulder hurts a lot, but just because of the way the curve messes up your body, it's my left knee that hurts. I gotta wear a knee brace all the time, wearing it right now. And the latest thing were my big toes. Just right before leaving, like 2 or 3 weeks before, my toes just started hurting a lot. And I tracked it down to like your big toes kind of being pushed inward by shoes. And it causes like bunions. And it's just one of these things, like I've noticed this a lot of times where just tons of people have this problem. It's super common. But I don't know, it's just like nobody ever talked about it when I was younger. Or maybe they did, I don't know. Maybe this is like what older people are always talking about, their health stuff. And you just kind of glaze over because it's like, yeah, whatever, old timer. And then you get there and you're like, oh man, all these people walking around all the time. Half the world has all these weird problems. Or like with my shoulder, for example. When I used to see older people doing like jogging and stuff in the park, and I'd see them with like their hands balled, like their fist balled and their hand pressed against kind of where your kidney is. And I thought it was because they had a stitch in their side. I thought that's where the pain was. But now I know it's their shoulder hurts because I do that same thing to ease the pressure on my shoulder. I'm just like, oh, there's that thing I've seen a million times. And now it's me. But this medical complaining is to say that I bought these little like rubber things you put around your big toes to put like a space between your big toe and your next toe over, and they definitely worked. I also have little things I wear at night too, just to sort of train your toes to go outward instead of curve in. And yeah, even after the 4-hour mega walk, my feet feel fine. So it's like awesome. My shoulders, however, not as much. I remember saying last episode, like, I think I'm getting stronger. Not yet. Yesterday, my shoulder blades were killing me. But I ain't dead yet. I'm pretty pleased overall with the state of my health. I'm starting to get a little more worried of like, man, traveling just used to be so easy. And now there's just so many little things that I got to watch out for. On the one hand, I guess maybe reasons why I shouldn't just be gallivanting around the earth. But on the other hand, if you just stay, I don't know, bedridden all day, you'll deteriorate that way too. Gotta find that happy middle. Anyway, enough of that ramble. Let's get to the actual ramble I wanted to do this episode, where I just wanted to talk about Airbnb and airplane ticket prices and how that guided what I'm doing on this trip. So my basic Airbnb history is I lived in Toronto from 2010 to 2015 or 16. I definitely stayed for a year longer than I should have because I lived in this cool apartment with a bunch of guys and it was super sweet. And then they just kept moving out one at a time and starting real lives and getting real jobs and starting families and stuff until eventually it was just me and my friend Matt left. And then he left as well, so I was like, all right, we're out of here. And man, that's one of those things. Our rent was pretty good because it was like this legacy apartment. You know, we were there for 5 years. And the guy who got the apartment before us, you know, like he took over from someone else's lease. So our thing stretched back like at least 9 years, where they could only do, by law, you can only increase the rent by a certain amount each year, whatever. So as soon as we left, the rent went from like whatever it was, $1,500 say, to like 26 or something. Maybe it was only 22, but I think it's like 26 now. It's bananas. The price just went crazy. It was in Little Portugal in Toronto, sort of cool neighborhood. So yeah, once everybody left, oh man, the beauty of being in a city again. There's a ramen place, and right across from it is a Middle Eastern place, and there's a sushi place next to that. Man, I was dying. In my hometown, it used to have nothing interesting at all. Just, burgers. Now it's starting to diversify a bit, but you really pay the small city tax. It's so cool to just have all these options. And just that you don't feel bad about getting food. Yesterday I got a shawarma plate. And it's like rice and tabbouleh salad and hummus. It's like healthy. It's not bad for you. Where if I went and splurged in my hometown, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Taco Bell. I'm going to go to Wendy's. And then the next day you feel like death. And you got to rewind and you're like, oh yeah, that's why. It's not that much of a mystery. So yeah, once everybody moved out in Toronto, it was clearly time to go. But 90% of my friends still live in Toronto or thereabouts. So I just, inertia, hard to get going. So I stayed for an extra year, and I think that was just the, Craigslist or something, got an apartment for another year. Then I finally got myself together to go back to Vancouver, because Vancouver is the first big city I ever moved to in 2004. And I hadn't been back in like 7 years. So I was like, all right, let's go back to Vancouver. And that was the first time I ever used an Airbnb. And it was just some guy's random spare room down by his fucking water heater. Way out in Richmond. But yeah, it was awesome. I was like, yeah, I like this. I don't mind just staying in someone's weird random room. And I think I was only there for a month. And then I got a job at Trees Organic on Granville. So it's a pretty long commute, but literally just a straight line, straight down to Granville and Waterfront. And then I got an apartment, and I guess that was kind of the 1-2 punch of I didn't mind the Airbnb at all, and the apartment just wasn't that good. I just had to jump through so many hoops to get this apartment. I liked the neighborhood because it was like by Commercial Drive. But the building itself was terrible, the roommates were nightmares. Had to prove I had a job. And then I got this place, and again, you're locked into the lease too. And it just kind of sucked. And there wasn't really any particular benefit even, because I also didn't have a credit card. I've never had a credit card because I just have no credit history. Besides, I guess, little things like paying off power bills and things. But that standard route of you're going to go to university or college, they give you a credit card and they hope you run it up, and then you build a credit history positively or negatively from there. I never did. And my jobs are so sporadic. But I thought this time for sure, and I don't even really need one. I only needed it for flights and stuff. But I thought, man, this time I got an apartment, I got an address, I got a landlord you can call to confirm where I live. I got a job, I got a boss you can call to confirm what a charismatic employee I am while I'm selling expensive cheesecake to people. And the bank still wouldn't give me the credit card. They just would not give me a credit card. It was insane too, because I remember, this is just how robotic banks are. This was the Bank of Nova Scotia in Canada. I had over $10,000 in the bank. So they wouldn't give me a credit card, but the guy's like, however, you do have quite enough of a balance that would you like to speak to someone about investment portfolios? And he's like, no, I would not. Like, it's clearly just the stuff that came up on this guy's little computer screen. Computer screen says, no, you can't have a credit card, but computer screen says you have enough money to get some mutual funds. Like, fucking give me a credit card, you fucks. It's so annoying. It's like you're not even talking to a person. So anyway, from there I got like a prepaid credit card, and then they shut that program down because now it's like your debit card can double as a credit card, and that's good enough because I really just use it for flights. And now I guess Airbnb. What was I doing before? PayPal maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, that planted the seed in my mind that Airbnb seems to suit me pretty well, and renting an apartment does not. So as the year lease was about to come up on that place, coincidentally, my friend Matt, that's when he was about to get married, and he's like, hey, before I get married, I'm gonna go to Amsterdam. Let's gather up some people. You wanna go to Amsterdam? And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I wanna go to Amsterdam. I've never been overseas. And in fact, since my lease was up like that month, just perfectly worked out, I was like, in fact, I'm gonna buy a one-way ticket to Amsterdam. I ain't coming back. I'm gonna go fucking travel the world. Oh, I'd already quit my cheesecake job too. I held on as long as I could. There's only one person I didn't get along with at that job. And just, if I can be frank, if someone doesn't get along with me at a job, it's not my fault. It's on them. I go so far out of my way to just make sure everything is cool and just to be polite and nice. And, we're all already at a shitty job we don't want to do. It doesn't need to be worse. And I got along with everybody else except this one idiot. So that one idiot was being an idiot one day, and I just quit. I was like, I'm fucking out of here. Fuck you. And it's one of those things that you think is going to be a lot more satisfying than it is, where it was me and said idiot one morning, and they were just being a piece of shit. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave. I'll leave right now. I've already decided. I'm quitting. As soon as a manager person comes in, I'm just telling them I'm leaving. I'm done. But if you want, I can go right now. I can leave right now, and you can just run this place by yourself all morning. How would you like that? And all idiot face could do is just be silent and not talk anymore, all red-faced and embarrassed because the fucking jig was up. The bluff was called. But instead of feeling even remotely like, haha, that shows you, instead it's just like, why did you make it have to come to this? What's wrong with people? Why are people dicks? Why did it have to be this way? I was about to quit anyway. I had another 6 weeks in me at best. Why'd you have to make it so shitty? So yeah, I bought a flight, and I got an Airbnb a few days before my friends were arriving. And then we got a big fancy Airbnb. It was super awesome. That is one thing. Traveling with people, I think that'd be the biggest benefit, is being able to split prices with people. Like a lot of these Airbnbs I'm staying at, they would accept 2 people. If I had somebody else to split the bill, it would make all this stuff much less financially painful. But yeah, when you got 3 people, I think we were only there for 4 days, the 3 of us. Like, these people just moved out and just let us live in their Amsterdam house. And it's like, hey, this is pretty fucking rad. But the Amsterdam trip, I'll save that story for some other time. Basically, because I'd never been out of North America, the, culture shock, I'd heard of culture shock, but I didn't really understand what it was. In hindsight, I didn't really fit in New York, and I think it might have been a bit of that. I think the differences between America and Canada, though relatively slight, I think I was feeling that. I was just uncomfortable a lot, but that was a case where it took 1.5 years for me to leave. In Amsterdam, nothing bad happened. Everyone was relatively nice to me. There's nothing I could pinpoint. It's just everything felt off. Just you wake up in the morning and everything around you feels weird and feels different. And it wore me down incredibly quickly. After my friends left, I don't even know if I lasted 2 more weeks in Amsterdam. And instead of the original plan, once you're over there, it's like, hey, it's so easy to get to England. It's so easy to get to France. It's so easy to get to these places. I didn't go to any of them. I just was looking at flight prices, and it's like, oh, look at that. Just to get a plane ticket to go all the way home, I found one that wasn't that expensive, and it just felt right. It's like, I just got to do this. And later I went back to Amsterdam, and it went a lot better the second time. And then Japan, etc., etc. I'll ramble about all those as I go. But my ticket back to Canada, I believe it just dropped me straight back in Toronto, if I remember right. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, again, all my friends still live in Toronto. My eventual plan was to make my way back to my hometown for Christmas or whatever. But I figured, what's the hurry? Let's take it a little slow. And that's when I just started grinding my way around Canada with Airbnb. Because I could just find places, if you rent like by the month, that would be cheaper. And, they would suck. They'd just be holes in the wall. Toronto was especially tricky. It's just an expensive city in general. But, I found a place like in like northern Scarborough where people were like packed in like sardines. My bed was like the normal bed, but then next to me was like 3 sets of bunk beds. And there's another room like that. And then downstairs there was more. It was absolutely insane. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. And let me think here. So, geez, there must have been nearly 20 people in there. It definitely had the capacity. I don't know if it was necessarily full. But I stayed there for like a whole month and yeah, it just wasn't that bad. I think North Americans were like extra just spoiled. Like, oh man, how can people live in these conditions where they're all packed in and so many people live in a household and yada yada. It's like, man, it's not that bad. It's like, yeah, you don't get to have your den, your big TV and your video games and a pool table in your basement or whatever the fuck people have. You don't get to have anything. All you get to have is a place to go sleep. But as long as your routine is just to go outside every day and live your life out in a city and then you just come back to sleep, it's totally no problem. I just found a little beach, but it really is little. It's literally 30 meters from side to side. I guess it's better than nothing. So yeah, I started doing that. Toronto and Montreal always used to be very affordable. That's when I started. I'd been to Montreal before because I have family here, but I started exploring it more on my own. I'll probably do another episode while I'm here just about my Montreal thoughts in general. But yeah, that's where I really developed my own oh yeah, I do really like Montreal. And out in Vancouver, there was always, I could always find something somewhere. There's a lot of McMansions in the greater Vancouver area. People would buy these houses that must have been incredibly expensive. They looked like smaller versions of the Fresh Prince's house and split them up and rent out the pieces. There's one place, it was, I think it's called Port Moody or Port Coquitlam. It's Port something, where there's like a relatively new branch of the SkyTrain in Vancouver that headed out there. And then from the end of it, you could take a tiny bus, they didn't even have a full-size bus, up the mountain. And it was just suburbs. It didn't feel like being on a mountain, but it was so crazy because the weather was literally different up there than it was in the rest of Vancouver. But that was one of my favorite places where this is like my ideal kind of Airbnb is I started walking up the hill and it was beautiful, just like walking up and down through these like amazing West Coast trees. Like what's the Endor maybe? The Ewok planet in Star Wars? Like I think it was filmed in the Pacific Northwest, so it looks like that. Beautiful. And then you get up to this fancy pants neighborhood in this fancy pants house. But where I stayed, there were other rooms that were kind of more proper rooms. This was one of the weirder Airbnbs I'd ever been in, where just the way the guy's house was laid out, these rooms had other ways to get in. And then they had like a stairway that you could go down the stairway to get into these rooms as well. So he padlocked the doors, so the stairway went to nowhere. And I basically rented the space under the stairs. You go down the stairs and I had my little Harry Potter nook that was actually quite large. And there was just a bed down there. And that's where I slept. And there was no windows and it was great. It really made me realize like if I ever build my own house someday for some goddamn reason, I'm gonna have a bedroom that does not have windows. Cause sure you can close the curtains and stuff, but it's not the same. It's not the same as when there's no possibility of light entering. Man, I had some good sleeps in that room. It was just like, fuck yeah. It is so goddamn dark in there. And it was so affordable. Like places like that, I don't remember anymore specifically how much it was, but it was certainly no more than my rent used to be, and I'm pretty sure it might have been less. And that was the beautiful Airbnb world that I was in before COVID. I'd just go to Vancouver, go to Montreal, go to Toronto, go back to my hometown. Then I went back to Amsterdam to kind of have a better experience the second time. I did the Japan trip, came back to Canada. It's like, this is great. You know, I mean, I am a son of privilege. You know, I got a family that's willing to finance this dumb shit that I like to do. So it's a little, sure, there's some shame. Oh, I'm not living the normal life. I didn't go get a degree and get a career and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I guess it's like classic third generation stuff, right? Of like you have the grandparent generation that established things, maybe weren't especially well off, but got the ball rolling. Then you get the second generation that got fancy degrees and became doctors and lawyers and whatnot. And then the third generation that is disconnected from the source of the wealth and just fucks around. And that's me. And I've made my peace with it. I'm willing to carry the burden of the shame because, I mean, all these jobs too, like, I don't know. I mean, nobody wants to hear the job philosophies of the guy who doesn't have a job. But basically it's just like, I mean, even just dumb stuff like when I worked at the cheesecake shop or whatever, pretty much any job I've ever had, there's just no need for it to be me. You know, people need jobs, right? Other people want these jobs. Why should I take your job that you might actually need? For me, it's like it was performative. Literally having a job was just so I could feel like less of a bum. It's kind of a weird situation, but anyway, that's where I'm at. And now I do this. I just wander around and make podcasts about it, apparently. But then COVID hit, and I mean, kind of luckily, I guess, I was in my hometown when it happened, because, you know, they were shutting down borders between provinces and everything for a while. And Fredericton, New Brunswick, for all of its faults, is really good when there's a global pandemic because it's the middle of nowhere. No one passes through it. I knew some people that got COVID, but nothing serious. I never even came close to getting it. So it was a good place to hunker down. And I was glad that I was there because, again, not to dwell on the negative, but my poor father passed away, not from COVID, just from cancer. And I just know I wouldn't have been there. There's almost no chance, you know, just because of going around to different cities and stuff. Who knows where I would have been? So instead, I was here. I was, in fact, the last person to see him. So, I mean, to be honest, in a weird way, COVID worked out okay for me. I got a lot of, I don't know, I got to be around where I just wouldn't have been. There's some lady sitting by the side of the water, staring pensively into the distance. I'm ruining the calm with my podcasting. I'll just keep moving along, So I guess things kind of opened up as far as COVID goes. I mean, arguably 2 years ago, but especially a year ago. You know, a lot of my friends started traveling and stuff, and it's like, hey, I'm going to Vegas, and I'm doing stuff. Everything seems to be okay. Or like pro wrestling was a good way to tell. On the WWE side, it was crazy. They just had no crowds. They put all these screens up that had fans, like, on their webcams on the screen. There's another person sitting, staring pensively. This is the place. This is the place you come to contemplate your Montreal life. The shoreline near Verdun Station. Yeah, it was like a panopticon. It was fucking creepy. And then AEW wrestling, they made these little pods. It was pretty cool. They had their own stadium in Jacksonville. So they set it up in these little family pods where you and your family could come in, go in your little like 4-person area. Then the next family would come in after, and the next. So you were never in contact with each other. And then you were each like pod was kept individual. So they actually had some crowds, and it felt a bit like pro wrestling's supposed to feel. But nowadays, turn on wrestling, it's just big arenas full of people, and I mean, everything seems okay. You still hear about COVID cases, and bad things can still happen. in the back of my mind, I'm like, I hope I don't get COVID. But clearly, the world is relatively back to normal. But the place I wanted to go the most was Japan, and it was very slow to open. And I wanted to give it some time. I think it opened last October, about a year before now. And I just figured it'd be good to give that first wave of travelers, let them go forge the path. I didn't really want to, everything was exorbitantly expensive, of course, as it still is, but, I didn't want to be the person to go there and I've got my COVID boosters and stuff. I believe I'm all up to date with things. But what if something was wrong? What if I didn't have enough stuff, or the date was too far out or something? There was some real crazy stories if you want to look up the YouTube videos of the time when Japan wasn't open to tourism yet, but there were people that, were citizens there that had to get back in, and they'd put them in these hotels for days and days and days, quarantined in a hotel. And you'd hear some stories about people who would be milling around in the what idiots, milling around in the hallways of the hotel, even though Japan loves rules. They do not need you breaking rules. They'd be milling around talking to their neighbor, and then they would get I was going to say extradited. What's the word? Exported, ejected, removed from Japan and sent back where they came from. And it's dude, what did you fucking think was going to happen? Why do you think, the country that would set up this system where you have to get tested all the time and you have to prove that you're in your hotel room and they just hang food on your doorknob, and do you really think these are the people that are going to be relaxed and cool about you milling around talking to your neighbor? It defeats the whole purpose. Fucking idiots. It must have sucked to get booted out for that. But what did you think was going to happen? Oh, I can see. It's weird. It's I don't feel the rain. I'm even holding my hand out and I don't feel it. But in the water, I can see it. I can see the rain droplet effects. It is quite overcast today, so hopefully it doesn't rain on me. But I got an umbrella and a little disposable raincoat tucked away just in case. So yeah, I gave it an extra year. I'm pretty sure at this point, they don't even request your vaccination info or anything anymore in Japan. Things seem much more relaxed. I haven't heard any horror stories. Everything seems to be going pretty smooth. So I was all right, let's finally get going. Let's get moving. But I thought I would basically just get back to the same type of crap I was doing before. Hop right back into the old routine. I thought I would meander my way across Canada, because I also have, this is just such a dumb assumption, that I thought being closer would be better, but it's not. As far as flying goes, distance does not matter. Location of origin matters. For example, I have a friend from Newfoundland who we became friends in Toronto. She moved back to Newfoundland. And I was like, one of these days I should go out there and visit, because I've always been a bit curious about Newfoundland. And I thought since I was already in New Brunswick, I was already in that general eastern part of Canada, I'm close, right? But every flight you have to double back. You got to double back to Toronto, then go to Newfoundland. There's just no direct flights. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So this was a somewhat similar situation where I thought I would meander here to Montreal and then hang around here for a month, and then meander out to Vancouver and hang out there for a month, and then fly, because it's obviously cheaper if you leave from Vancouver, right? Vancouver's closer. But my assumptions got tested, because that was not really an option. My old method of getting an Airbnb and staying for a month is just gone. It just it's not that you can't, but it's so expensive. These little hole-in-the-wall places that I was staying, I guess it's those are the places that were the most inflexible, the little cheap places that I like to stay at. Because again, I would take anything as long as it was just somewhere I could sleep. I did not need any frills. So I got to assume when COVID hit, those are the places that they're not just going to wait They're not just going to wait for 4 years for the world to open back up again. They just convert it into places. They just convert it into normal apartments. So looking at Airbnb now, there's still lots of listings, but it's like fancy pants. It's like that one I was saying me and my friends got in Amsterdam for the whole house. All kinds of stuff like that. If you want to spend $150 a night, fill your boots. There's all kinds of stuff. But it used to be that like $30 a day was a lot for me. I could always find somewhere under that. And on very rare occasions with discounts, or sometimes if it was like, the low season, like the middle of winter where people aren't traveling, you could get places crazy cheap, under $20 a night sometimes. It's bananas. Nothing like that exists anymore at all. Vancouver, for example, if I wanted to stay for a month, I only found one place. It was way outside the beaten path, even a little more so than the one I was describing before. It was only available for an entire month, not flexible at all. I had to get the whole month. And that month was over $1,000. And like my monthly stuff, again, it was variable. But I don't know that I ever really went above 800. And then it would go down from there. I'd find places for 700, or in crazy rare cases, like again, mostly because it's like the winter time and there's no tourists, and places would be like available for a month for like $500. Like it could happen as long as you're flexible and you don't worry about staying central. These places were around. Now this one in the outskirts of Vancouver was the only one. It was still over $1,000, and that was the cheapest and the only one. Everything else was way above that. And I was like, I'm not even that excited at this particular moment of going back to Vancouver. I've been to Vancouver many times. I don't really want to spend a bunch of money to go to Vancouver. Fuck it, I'll just stay in New Brunswick for a while if that's the case. But then I was like, but good old Montreal, right? Montreal always, for whatever reason, was a bit cheaper than the other major Canadian cities. And it's not much different here. I really couldn't find much. So it kind of ruined the whole plan in the sense that I was like, if I'm gonna spend all this money, I'm not gonna spend it in Montreal and Vancouver. Let's just get the hell out of here then. Let's just force our way out of this continent, get over to Japan, and whatever other stuff around there I might end up doing. If it's gonna be expensive no matter what I do, I certainly don't care about Canada. I'm from here. I've been here a lot. So I put that on hold for a bit. It's like, okay, that Airbnb plan wasn't gonna work. But the good thing is, then that got me examining flight prices. So let's shift gears from Airbnb for a bit over to airplane prices. So flight prices are never good. There's really no good way around it. I never did find any way to squirrel my way through necessarily. And that's mainly just because I'm Canadian. Canada is an enormous country, very few major cities, and not that many people compared to its size. We just don't have cheap flights. It just almost doesn't exist. Apparently on the West Coast, there are some of these really budget airlines that are trying to get going. But even that, I did find this one weird flight that was Montreal to Vancouver on some random date for $70. And I was like, well, that's crazy. That should be several $100s. So just out of curiosity, I did book it, and I'm like, okay, it's weird that the one piece of this puzzle I have booked is just a random Montreal to Vancouver flight. But I thought, I don't know, it's the start. I guess we'll see what happens. But that flight just got canceled. I think what it was a flight going to Japan ultimately, but it was picking up most of its passengers in Vancouver. So the Montreal to Vancouver leg was not full, so they were willing to just sell the tickets at any price just to try to fill things up. But then it obviously didn't work because they just canceled the flight anyway. So yeah, I mean, these things, it's not impossible to find stuff in Canada, but it's very rare, and then they just cancel it anyway. It's not anything you can count on. But that piggyback idea did get in my mind of like, oh yeah, what about this? What about flights leaving from places besides Vancouver? Because Vancouver has an enormous Asian population. So the flights from Vancouver going to Japan are actually very popular, you know? It's like, oh yeah, maybe that's actually not a good place to leave from. Maybe that's not the best plan. I can see the water again, and now it is placid. Wherever that rain was, it passed. I've been walking past a lot of hobo encampments, just random tents and stuff. Can't tell if there's actually people in them or not. Maybe I should make my way back to civilization. So yeah, just out of curiosity, I started checking, like, I don't know, what if I did put, like, Montreal to Japan? Again, in my dumb brain, I just assumed that would cost more because it's farther. But that's where I found some cool, weird flights that I never considered of just, like, strange, like, layovers and transfers through the United States. I was like, oh, that's interesting, just these weird just weird flight websites with just dumb names that just scour different airlines and arrange stuff. And they were pitching me stuff like you could leave from Montreal, go down to San Jose or Las Vegas or something, have a 6 or 7 hour layover, and then go to Japan, and it would be cheaper. And I started examining these because I'm like, that's cool. I'm not in a hurry. I already had it in my mind. I was going to start doing this travel podcast. I was like, it could be a fun episode. It could be an adventure. The weird layover. But I hadn't really settled on anything. I was just looking at different stuff and experimenting and exploring. Each day was different. It would always be a random different route with different times they were leaving and different arrivals and all different weird shit, different amounts of layovers. But they did toss me one that was Montreal to Calgary to Japan. And I was like, oh, that seems kind of, if I had to pick one, that seems better because I'm staying in Canada the whole time. I just don't have to go through the technicality of going through American customs and stuff, which would probably be fine. But I mean, if I could avoid it, I would certainly be pleased to. It's weird. I'm like still down in the woods. I feel like I'm in Huckleberry Finn or something. There's another tent, but I can hear the cars. The cars are definitely nearby. I'm only visually in the woods. But yeah, then as I was dicking around on these whatever weird websites, like I don't know what they're called, but like Flying Dreams and I don't know, Super Kiwi, just stupid names. That I was like, this seems weird anyway. Why do these flight websites have these dumb names? But there was like a flight from Montreal to Japan for like $200. And I was like, what in the name of fuck is going on here? Because all these flights were over $1,000. And if you really scrape, to try to do these weird layover plans, it would still be like $800 or $900. So it's like $200. There's clearly something wrong here. But I was thinking how my friend Katie, she took a bus once from Toronto to Boston, I believe it was, because Megabus or whatever the bus company was, it had this weird promotion where if you were really on top of things and you were the very first to like 5 or 10 people to book a given bus route each month, it's only $1 or some crap like that. So her and her friend managed to do it and they went to Boston for $1. So I was like, would an airline have a thing like that? Seems unlikely given just the price of fuel to get to Japan. $200 is not going to cover anything. But I was like, whatever, dude. Just book it and worry about it later. I was like, I'll figure this out later. That's such an insane deal, I got to try. But then as I went to go book this flight, it's like, oh, last second change. The new updated price is $936 or whatever. And I was like, all right, you know what? These websites are weirding me out at this point. What is the deal with those? I decided I better stop and just take a step back and do a little research. And pretty much immediately I found there's this website TripAdvisor. I've never really used it before, but man, it's good. It's been around forever. And any random situation or weird question or problem you might have about traveling, TripAdvisor probably has a thread where somebody talked about it and gave some kind of answer that could be useful. I highly recommend TripAdvisor. And TripAdvisor had, no word of a lie, dozens, probably over 100 different threads about these Fly Kiwi or Dream Flight, whatever, just any of these, whatever they are. Cheapo Air. I came out of the woods here behind a significant fence. What the fuck is this? Like, I cannot get past this fence, level fence. I guess I'll just double back on the little road here and see what happens. What the fuck? And yeah, basically it would just be a non-stop barrage of these posts going back many, 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 many years. There would basically be people saying, hey, I booked a multi-leg flight through one of these things and I had problems, don't do it. And then the responses would be like, there have been so many of these posts, like, we're trying to be sympathetic, but if you had done any research, this has been brought up literally dozens of times for years. Like, it's hard to feel sorry for you when you did this to yourself. And basically the problem is, as I understand it, so these are flight resellers. They are official, they're not like scam websites. You do in fact buy flights from them, but they're middlemen. So if anything goes wrong with one of the legs of your flight, you can't really deal directly with the airline in question because you didn't buy your flight from them, and trying to deal with the middleman is awkward at best, and oftentimes like they can't really do anything because they're just resellers, they're just middlemen. So people were saying it could be handy, particularly like if you're in Europe and you just want to try to get a cheap flight from London to Amsterdam, and it's really nothing can really go wrong there. You just buy the flight and you take it and it's probably going to be fine. Although they said even in those cases, you're probably still just better off buying from the airline itself, because why not? Why bother going through this extra hoop? But that's essentially what they said, is like, you could maybe use these sites as an interesting way to get ideas for how to string together an array of flights. But then you should do it yourself. It's more work, but you should go to each individual airline and buy each flight yourself. So if anything goes wrong, if flights get canceled, if flights get changed, if things get delayed, you have no assurance through the third party, at least if you buy it from the airline. Now the airline, has an incentive to look after you, to make sure you get where you're supposed to go. And that makes a lot of sense. Oh wait, let me jump in here from the future. If you hear a car drive by, there's not cars down by the waterside hobo path. I forgot to mention the that weird $200 thing where it listed the $200 flight to Tokyo. And I was saying maybe, because Megabus does those $1 bus rides, like maybe it's just some kind of crazy promotional thing. But it's not. It turns out that's another thing TripAdvisor advised me about. The less reputable flight resellers, some of them are better than others. The really lame ones, they'll just throw those in there so that their crazy listing shows up if people are searching different services, just to drive traffic to your site. And luckily, in my case, I didn't even have the opportunity to buy that ticket. It's just as soon as I tried, it immediately said, oh, by the way, the price has just changed 1 second before you clicked that. Now it's normal price. Apparently what used to happen to people, and I don't know if this can still or if this is too scammy, is it used to be that you would actually pay for that flight. Then they would send you a notice saying the flight cost has changed. And you would have to either go through the process of getting a refund or pay extra to upgrade your ticket. Like, what bullshit. What a load. But that was I was already quite willing to take the advice of the many, many TripAdvisor people who said it's just best not to mess with these third-party companies. But that was just such blatantly awful behavior. It's like I would never want to deal with any company that pulls shenanigans like that. Fuck them. Fuck them and all their ilk. That one example was so bad that it made all of them seem bad. I'm like, how am I supposed to sort out who sucks and who doesn't? Like, forget it. Forget it. I'll just buy the tickets from the airline. And if it is a little more expensive, it's well worth it just to know that if something goes horribly wrong, you have an actual airline that you can deal with and not... I think that company in particular, that was the Dream one, whatever it was. And it's like, man, get the fuck out of here. Very uncool. All right, back to the waterside path. And in fact, this kind of ties in. I just learned this recently. I'm glad it wasn't just me who was wondering this. Now that I got a better phone, I'm like much more updated on my phone tech. I don't have a phone plan. I just got, a smartphone that I use Wi-Fi with, but I could get for Air Canada, say, I got the Air Canada app, and it's just neat. You put your flight in the app and it tells you things are on time and keeps you updated on stuff. And then 24 hours before, it's funny, I'd already shut down the internet at my apartment. So I was just walking past Wi-Fi from a closed coffee shop, and I was like, I'll just hop on the internet for a second. And then I got the notification from Air Canada, hey, do you want to do check-in? Do check-in right now. You can do it virtually. And I remember my friend Mike mentioning, with the cheaper airlines in particular, sometimes, they try to nickel and dime you for every little thing. Sometimes they'll charge you to do check-in at the airport. You can just do it over the internet, and, it's free. But yeah, I checked in, got assigned a seat. My boarding pass was just a QR code on my phone. And I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. That's the future. But what the hell is this? I know checking in early is not a new thing, but it's all pretty new to me. I was living way behind the times, so I would always just go into the airport and do everything, in person and talk to a person and check in and get a paper ticket. So I was like, what is the purpose of checking in? What the hell is this? What does this mean? And it turns out other people had that question. Good old TripAdvisor. I looked it up. And yeah, other people were also like, I don't know what this is all about. What is the point of this exactly? And it turns out a big part of it is because of these third-party sellers, is that the airline doesn't release money to the third-party seller until it's confirmed that you for sure really are partaking in this flight. And up until then, they want to keep it flexible so they can have people on standby, or if they need to switch people over from other flights. I don't know. They want to keep it flexible or whatever. I don't know. Or if something does go wrong with the flight, it's just much harder to reimburse everybody. So they wait until the last day, basically, and then set everything in motion. Obviously, that's a bad explanation. I don't quite fully understand it myself. But if you're ever curious, you can go look it up. Because I was just running it through my head, I don't know why I checked in at all. I don't know what the purpose of this was. But it tied back into these resellers a lot. So essentially, though, the advice that came through again and again is just don't use the resellers. You could, and it'll probably be fine, but it's just not worth the risk. Just buy the tickets directly from each airline. So, of course, being in Canada, that gave me limited options. Basically Air Canada or WestJet. But I was thinking back to all those weird flight plans that Kiwi Dreams gave me with the weird different flights. Because, again, I just would rather not... pretty much everything to Japan is essentially a direct flight. It's hard not to be a direct flight, There's nowhere to stop in the middle. But as much as I could shake it up, I would if it meant it could be cheaper. And then the one that stuck in my mind was the Montreal-Calgary one. So I looked into that, and that was an option that I could just do purely through my domestic carrier. But at this point, I still was dragging my feet a little, because my only plan was I just kind of want to get to Japan by Christmas. I wanted that to be my Christmas present to myself, because I don't really like traveling at Christmas that much, because, it's just a drag. I've had Christmases in Vancouver and Christmases in Toronto where all my friends are gone because they live around there, so they go visit their families and I'm just stuck there. And it's just like, oh, this kind of sucks. But I suspected Christmas in Tokyo, I would feel fine about it. I'd be like, this is fucking cool. I'm in Japan. So I just vaguely was like, let's try to get to Japan by Christmas. And again, my initial idea was to go to Montreal for a month, go to Vancouver for a month, get to Japan just before Christmas. But because the Airbnbs were so horrifyingly expensive, that changed my timeline a bit, where it's like, all right, I guess I get some wiggle room now. It's very easy to get there by Christmas. If I fly there directly, I can leave anytime, no hurry. Man, these podcasts have all been so long so far. It's funny, because in my mind, I always think like, is there really that much to say? Surely this won't be that long. Maybe it'll just be kind of quick. And I'm still curious what's going to happen in Japan, because my plan is I'm going to try to record a podcast every single day while I'm there. But then I'm going to put them out once a week. So when I'm not in Japan anymore, I can still vicariously relive my adventures. But surely there's just not necessarily that much to say each day. But I guess we'll see, because they've all been longer than I expected so far. But okay, yeah, so I started dragging my heels a bit because I was like, all right, no big hurry to leave, I guess. And I was trying to figure out the logistics of when am I going to arrive? And then, you get 90 days in Japan, so what time will it be when I leave? And then my plan had always been to then go somewhere else for a while and try to go back to Japan for a second 90 days, because that's how it used to work. People used to leave, so I heard tell, people would leave for a day, go to South Korea, fly right back and get another visa. But that's yet another thing that, who knows, during COVID, it seemed like maybe that had changed. And I thought maybe I would only get the one 90-day visit to Japan. So do I really want to go in the winter? But I looked into that more, and it turns out it seems like it should be fine. As long as I have a passport in good stead and I can prove I've got finances, and I do leave Japan for some amount of time before I go back, it should be no problem. But there's no laws on the books. This was where there's like a Reddit about visiting Japan that is amazing. They have weekly threads where you just ask the question and the people try to answer, and it's just like super duper good information. Because like in this case with the second visit within the year, it's one of these situations where there is no official law, there is no official rule, because they want to keep it fuzzy for themselves. They basically just don't want people to sneak into the country for work or to try to live there without the proper stuff. So they want to be able to turn people away whenever at their discretion. So the laws are quite fuzzy, deliberately, if you try to look it up. But since I'm just a visitor, I'm just a useful idiot, basically. I'm just a guy who's going to go spend the family fortune buying onigiri from 7-Eleven. So I believe I should have no problem. I think I'm exactly the kind of tourist they want. Someone who'll just go dump money into the economy because I think Japan is cool. But then also, on top of all these other considerations, there is just, again, the inertia. Just that I'd been back home for 4 years and just in this one apartment for 3 years. And as much as I was not enjoying that routine, it was the routine and it was all set up. And all this traveling and stuff, it's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's not the easiest. Traveling by yourself too, extra layer of anxiety. So I was just putting it off, just kind of putting off setting things up. And then what finally spurred me on as I was researching flights a little more is WestJet was cheaper than Air Canada. And I realized WestJet does not fly to Japan in the winter. It was actually relatively new that they even offer flights to Japan. It used to just be Air Canada in Canada. Or, in Vancouver there'd be other stuff. Cathay Pacific, I think. I don't know, different stuff. But for my purposes, WestJet was a bit cheaper. And yeah, there were very limited, there was a point where the tickets just disappeared. And I was like, oh, what is that all about? And that's when I saw that around the end of October, seasonally, they stop offering the flight, which makes economic sense. And it was literally, again, most of the flights were like $1,400. If I wanted to get the one that was under $1,000, think the one I got was somewhere between 800 and 900, closer to 900. But it was the good old Montreal to Calgary to Tokyo route that I had seen before, the route of my dreams. But there was only like a couple of seats left. And the stuff from, I don't know, a few weeks earlier with these like layovers that were 6 or 7 hours, I guess a lot of that too was going down through the States. But even the original Montreal-Calgary one I saw, I don't remember the layover being that horrible. This one is horrible. It's a 4-hour flight from Montreal to Calgary and then a 19-hour layover in the Calgary airport. And then a 10-hour flight to Tokyo. So it's really eerie on my itinerary. It's like, I noticed like with my Airbnbs, it's like I got an Airbnb till October 24th. And then the next one is October 26th. It's like, oh, did I make a mistake? That's wrong. There's 2 days missing in there. But nope, it's because I'm going to spend 2 days living in the airport and on the airplane. But again, I'm going to do a podcast about it. I think it'll be interesting because I looked up too, like, I found out there's 2 different websites, at least 2, about where to sleep in airports. So I haven't done the proper research yet, but I did briefly look like at Calgary and there's like, oh, here's like the 3 best places to try to sleep overnight. I expect it's going to be miserable. I'm a bad sleeper anyway, but maybe I can just catch like a series of cat naps. I'm not bad at that. I can conk out for 20 minutes pretty good and then I just wake back up. But man, we'll see. We'll see. Night in the airport. But that's what finally got things rolling. Is like, geez, I really don't have any choice here. Either I got to wait till spring or I just got to spend an extra $500 or $600 on this flight for no reason. So I booked that flight, Montreal to Calgary to Tokyo. But of course it starts in Montreal and I wasn't there yet. I was just going to kind of book all of those together. But there was just no good way to escape from Fredericton. The cheapest flight I could find was like $300. It's just so weird that it's like $300 for this tiny little 55-minute nothing flight where it was only 800 and something to get all the way to Tokyo. It's unfortunate, but hey, that's the price of being in the middle of nowhere. Could be worse. People in even smaller places don't even have the luxury. At least I had a direct flight to Montreal. I didn't have to go somewhere else and somewhere else. But I was just going to do that all together. Why not just make it one big super day? But the timing just didn't work out super well for transferring. Like if I flew straight to Montreal and then transferred to my Japan flight, I like to give myself ample time. I got trapped overnight in Russia once because I didn't have enough layover time, and I'm not going to let that type of thing happen again. I want as much time as possible. And it was just kind of not working out that well. And I just kind of missed Montreal. I just like Montreal a lot. So it's like, even if I don't get my original plan of just full spending a month in Montreal, I only booked 12 days in Montreal. And the 12 days was almost as expensive as the month used to be. But it's like, it is what it is. But this way I can get to Montreal, soak in a little bit of Montreal before I go. So this is where I am right now, and it feels a little weird because I'm so used to mega slow travel, where I just really do just stay in each place for at least a month, if not more. And it is kind of nice and relaxing because it doesn't feel like visiting, it just feels like you live there for a while. 12 days is not a short visit, but it's a lot shorter than usual, so I am getting that weird feeling of like I was saying at the start, the weird pressure of like, do I even need a Metro card? It's not like I'm going to be a citizen, I'm not really living here. And then it's like, oh, should I go do stuff? Should I go see stuff? Like, I got to go see Mount Royal. I got to go see the St. Joseph's Cathedral. Like, what else do I want to do in Montreal? Where before it would just be like, who cares? Relax. Just ramble around Montreal. This feels a little odd, but it's not bad. It just feels more like normal travel, I guess, where that's not the kind of travel I've really experienced since I was a kid. Going on like family trips, but it sure is a different proposition when you only have like a week and you just got to squeeze in all the stuff you want to do. It's like, woof, that is not my style, that's for sure. But pleasantly, once all this stuff was set up, it's sunny now. The overcastness has passed. pleasantly, once I got all the stuff set up to get to Tokyo, it's like, all right, next step, got to have some places to actually stay in Tokyo. I was hoping, my main hope was that all the old Airbnbs I stayed at that I was already familiar with and that were awesome would just still be there. But a similar thing happened in Japan as in Canada. Just those Airbnbs just ain't there anymore. I got a little tricked at first because the first place I stayed, near Ikebukuro, it was gone. Its listing was just deactivated. But then it seemed like the place I stayed in Fukuoka and the place in Akiruno seemed to still be there. I was like, whoa, really? Cool. But their availability was just open. It was just everything was available, and there were no reviews since 2020. And I was like, well, wait, what? What's going on here? I think I was looking at it on like the phone, and then when I switched to the laptop version of Airbnb, then it said like this property has been deactivated. Like I could only see it because I'd been there before. But if you searched on a map, they just didn't come up. And I was like, that's a shame. Well. But then as I started looking around, I'll get into all my individual Japanese Airbnbs as I go there. It is more expensive. Like before, I really only stayed at 3 places in 3 big chunks. Like 40 days near Ikebukuro, 3 weeks in Fukuoka, 3 weeks in Akiruno, and out of there. This time it's like spread about. I've got a whole bunch of different weird little Airbnbs all over the place. And they are more expensive than before, but not like this situation in Canada. You know, there's like a lot of stuff available for $30 and under a day. And some places very, very cheap. And then there are some times where I dipped in and spent more, where it's like, maybe it's like $30 a day for some hostel that doesn't actually seem all that great. And some of the reviews are like, this place is kind of packed in. Where if I bump it up to like $44 a night, you know, it's a bit more, $14 more, I guess, but it's a whole apartment to myself. I'm like, wow, you know, like that's, I guess, how the slippery slope happens. I normally wouldn't spend $45 a night on an Airbnb, but the really, really cheap places just weren't really there anymore. And the semi-cheap places were what should have been the cheap places, like they just weren't that good. So then to bump it up a bit more and just to have like a whole apartment, it's like, holy crap, can't say no to that. So all in all, it all has been definitely more expensive than it used to be, but ultimately it worked out not so bad. So I got my flight to Japan. I've got the whole 90 days booked in Japan, presuming they don't turn me away at the border for some weird reason. And that's all I got so far. I'm guessing after that, I'll probably go to South Korea. And I do have a friend in Australia who was like, hey, you should come visit. You can hang out in my apartment or whatever, keep my dog company. But even though, again, you know, distances, it's like, oh yeah, I'll be closer to Australia, right? Sort of, not really. Australia is just really freaking far away. There's no easy or cheap way to get to Australia. So we'll see, I don't know. I don't know beyond that. But that's the basic story. Long story short of that whole ramble is that flights and Airbnbs are more expensive than they were before COVID. No kidding, right? Very obvious now that I see it all. It's like, yeah, of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? But if you really scramble around, there's still stuff around that's not so bad, relatively doable, particularly if you're like me and you do my weird thing of not having an apartment back home. Like, I think that's a big part of what makes traveling so expensive is back home, you're still paying for all your stuff. Not me. I let the rent go. All the utilities are in someone else's name now. I'm not paying double anywhere. I'm just paying for this. So it's not so bad. But of course, ultimately, as I will of course never forget, this is still only really doable because I have generous benefactors in my family. It'd be nice if I was, I don't know, some like an online columnist. I don't know. I don't even know what job I could do. Maybe someday I'll be a fancy pants writer and I'll actually have some money. But again, by then I'll be so old. So thank God I can do it now while I'm still relatively spry. Because yeah, for any of my little complaints now, like, oh, my toes kind of hurt, my shoulders kind of hurt. 20 years from now, I'll be looking back at mid-40s me and being like, that guy was a fucking maniac. He could climb a tree. That guy was awesome. What did he have to complain about? So that's where I'm at right now. I'm in it. I'm in the moment. Live in the moment. Be in the moment. I'm just rambling at this point. This has been long enough. So that's the end of that episode. Next episode, we'll probably just talk about Montreal. Thank you for listening to my rambling travel adventures. Au revoir. Should that be a thing? Should I say goodbye in the language of where I'm at, or is that pretentious? It's probably pretentious. Okay, see you later.